Well, good morning, everybody. Ooh, it's hot.
Here, Rick. Let me fix it. Go ahead, Ronnie. Keep.
How's Rich? Glad for each and every one out this morning. Today's lesson is in 2 Corinthians, two chapters, 11, 17 through 30, and the 12th chapter, 9 and 10. Paul, the name of the lesson is Grace in Troubled Times.
That's good.
Grace. Webster says grace is a favor or kindness shown without regard to the worth or merit of the one who receives it, in spite of what a person deserves. I heard a lot of testimonies, far above and all in this morning, and there's no one, not in this church, not on this earth, got what they deserve.
Right. Amen.
It's all through the grace of God, His unmerited love, that every one of us in here received the gift of Jesus Christ.
Right, buddy.
I always like to bring these lessons out. You know, when you start on a lesson, it starts at these lessons is what's happening, but we need to know where we're at or how we got to this point. See, the city of Corinth was a wealthy city, a really large city of about 500,000 people, 500,000 people, made up of all different nationalities. People flocked in there because it was a very important trade city. And they was a lot of worldly people, Gary. They had a lot of money and wealthy people.
Yeah.
And they just about that city, anything goes.
Yep.
They had gambling, legalized prostitution.
Right.
It was they had all kinds of athletes and games going on. Said they had all kinds of, where it was a big ship naval town. They built ships, did bronze and pottery. There's all kinds of business. So we had all kinds of people there, and they were used to having any kind of liberty they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when Paul come in and established a church, the people that was in the church was used to having all these liberties and all these different things, that anything goes, and that's the way they was. A lot of them was born and raised and, went. So Paul, there was a lot of false teachers there. And people, they was following these false teachers because false teachers was impressing them with how smart they was and what all they done and what all they was.
What?
And how they was, what would you say, what class they was in, what class of people they was. And all this was, they was following because they was impressed of who they was, or what they said, how they was boasting on themselves, or what they was.
Prestige was a big thing then.
It was a big thing, prestige, and people was getting on board with this. So Paul, he kind of used, and as you read this lesson, he quoted it, it was foolish to boast on oneself. But he used their methods, because let's don't forget that Paul was right out of the pure Jewish, he was pedigree. He was from a wealthy family, Jewish family. He had before all this, Paul studied under the most famous rabbi, Gamaliel, and he was the man for the Jewish sect.
He'd been there and done that, hadn't he?
He'd been there and done that.
Yep.
And so if you was going on prestige, Paul was going to say, hey,
I can tell you.
I was everything they was and more.
He had been to Harvard and Yale. You know?
Yeah, that's right. So he kind of used their methods of getting up and boasting on oneself to say, hey, are you following these people because of their prestige? You know, that I've been there, done that. I have all those credentials, but they mean nothing.
Right.
But he stood up and boasted on himself and reiterated that what his pedigree was and what he was, you know.
Right.
So let's read the lesson if you want. We'll start here on my left, on 17, chapter 11, verse 17.
That which I speak it not after the Lord, but as it were foolishness, foolishly, in the confidence of boasting.
I speak as concerning reproach, as though we had been weak. Howbeit, whereinsoever I am bold, I speak foolishly. I am bold also.
Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are the seed of Abraham? So am I.
Right.
Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more in labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prison more frequent, in deaths often.
Mm-hmm.
Of the Jews, 5 times I received 40 stripes, save one.
Thrice I was beaten with rods, once was I stoned, thrice was I suffered shipwreck, and a night and a day I have been in the deep.
Yeah, been there.
In journeyings often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils by mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils of the wilderness, in perils of the sea, in perils among false brethren.
In weariness, in painfulness, in watching often, in hungry and drunk, in fasting often, in cold and naked.
Besides those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches.
Who is weak, and I am not weak? Who is offended, and I groan not?
If I must glory, I will glory of the things which concern my infirmity.
And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my weakness, that the power of Christ may rest upon me.
Yeah.
Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, in Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
Amen.
That's right.
So we get back to, Paul was asking them, what are you basing your criteria on these leaders? Well, everything they are, I am. They bragged on how they was the seed of Abraham, what position they had, and Paul was all those things. And if you want to judge your Christianity on how you suffered for Christ, Paul suffered more than anyone else. But it was said unto him, and Jesus said when he saved him, said, Paul, you're going to must suffer great things.
Right.
See, Paul put out a lot of persecution. And Paul got persecuted a lot. See, the Bible said it's not by works that any man should boast. There's nothing you can do, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing no one can do that deserve Jesus Christ.
Right.
It's all about grace that anyone receives the gift.